All right, so welcome back to part 3 of this test-driven development tutorial where we are building out an Express backend using TDD. What I'm going to do here is I want to build out this other flow. If you go back to the first diagram that I showed you, we implemented the logic of rating a thumbnail, but we haven't implemented the endpoint to get a random thumbnail to kind of display in the UI. So again, using test-driven development, I want to start with some of this logic by building out a test and then building out the implementations. The thing that we need to build right here, or the kind of the business logic that we need to build, is a function that returns us a random image that we can send back to the client with a REST API. Okay, so I'm going to start at the lower level of what I think we might need, and that is we need a function that kind of lists all the files in a directory and then returns one at random. So let's just go ahead and make a test file. I'm going to say get random image .test.ts, and we can start building out a test file. So I'm going to describe and assume that there is a function called get random image. And let's just go ahead and write a simple if statement to describe what the test needs to do. So in this case, we want to say returns a random image from the images/backlog directory. Okay, and we can make this more dynamic if we want to. Like, it doesn't have to be hard-coded, the images/backlog. This could be something that we pass in and it gets us a random image. So let's just go ahead and write a test. I'm going to say await, and I'm going to call a method, assuming that we have this function definition kind of implemented somewhere. We'd probably want to just call it, and that should give us back a random image in this directory. And we could abstract this some more by actually passing that directory, but let's just keep it simple. And I'm going to say the image that comes back should be defined. We can kind of make this better as we implement this more. So we have a random test, or we have a test that we should be able to run and it should fail. So let's just verify that this happens. I'm going to run this test. We should see a failure because obviously we don't have this function implemented anymore. So let's go ahead and implement this function. So implement get random image .js. Actually, it's supposed to be TypeScript. I keep putting JS for some reason. I think I named this one JS as well, so my bad. I work full-time in JavaScript, so when I'm doing these TypeScript tutorials on YouTube, I sometimes forget what I'm doing. So we need to have this function basically export a constant function named getRandomImage, and for right now it could just return null because we still want this test to fail. But we can import this in the test now, and the test should make it a step further. I mean, it's still going to fail, but it's going to fail on a different reason. It's going to say that it expected this to be defined, but it got undefined. All right, so for some reason this actually ran and it passed. So this test is bad. For some reason, this is returning null, and to be defined should not be passing. So let me just verify what's going on here, because this test should have failed. Image null to be defined. Well, I guess this to be defined just verifies that it's not undefined. So I guess this will pass, but passing for the wrong reasons in my opinion. But anyway, we can kind of work towards making this better. So let's say that there is a function that this thing can use to get all the images inside of a directory. So I'm going to say we're going to have a function that's passed in called get images in directory. And when we call this function, it's going to basically give us back all the images in a directory. So we're going to mock that out in our test. So I'll say const get images in directory is a function which is going to basically just return. I'm going to say mock return value. And that can return an array of some images. So I'll say like a.png, b.png, and c.png. All right, so now I should be able to pass that implementation using the dependency injection here. And when I run this, I should get an image back that's either going to be A, B, or C, hopefully. So what I'm going to do is abstract this a little bit more, and I'm going to say const images is this. And now that we have the images array defined up here, let's just use that here that we're going to mock out. And I'm going to say random image is going to be the result of this calling this function. And I want to make sure that random image is actually, I can do this another way. I can say images to contain random image. All right, so whatever that this thing happens to return, whatever string this happens to return, I want to make sure that it actually exists in this mock that we kind of set up here. So we should be able to run this test. It's probably going to fail. And it's saying that null did not exist in A, B, or C. So let's just go back to our implementation. We should be able to get this working by just having it actually return a random image. So get images in directory. We could say const images is equal to call this function. So in JavaScript, to return a random thing, typically you have to do like some math.pow and then you times it by the length of your array. So I'm going to say images of index, parse int, math.pow, or sorry, math.random. I don't know why I'm saying pow. And then I'm going to times that by images.length. So that'll give us a random image from an array, a random element in an array. And that should hopefully return something. Argument of type number is not assignable to parameter type string. So why is this failing? I guess parseInt is supposed to take a string, but I'm passing it a number. So I think I'd also do math.floor. That might also be better. All right, so let's try running this and see if that makes the test pass now. All right, so this test is passing. We have mocked out a get images in directory function, and that is going to return 3 strings. And we are basically verifying that this function returns a random one of those. Not necessarily the first one, or second one, or the third one, but a random one. So let's just go ahead and implement. We can kind of move down to implement this function here, because right now we don't actually have this implementation created, but we're going to need to use it in just a second. So let's just go ahead and make a new test. And again, using test-driven development, let's try to build out the test first for this function. I'll write a describe block. I'm going to write an if statement and say should return, or it returns a list of all files in a directory. Maybe I should say all file paths in a directory. Yeah, I'll just say all files in a directory. All right, so this one, we don't need to do too much. We're going to mock very similar to how we did it with this other file mover. We're going to have to probably bring in JS mock. So I'm going to pretty much bring in all this logic so we can mock out the file system, because I believe we're going to have to call something like this. And we are going to call a before each on this. I'll go ahead and run this so that we can actually mock out this implementation. And I named this .js again, so sorry about that. So let's look at the node library and see, or let's look at the fs library and see what we can do. I think there's a way to list all the files in a directory. I'm going to have to Google this actually. So let's say node fs list files in directory. Let's see if this actually has a built-in way to do it. You can use fs read dir or fs read dir sync. All right, so we're just going to go ahead with this. This should return us an array of files, and we should be able to mock this one out. So again, I like using the sync methods. If this was a production application, I would not be using the sync methods. I would be doing promises and stuff. But this is just for an example. So don't get up in arms because I'm using the sync methods in Node. So what we're going to do is we are going to basically verify, very similar to this other test, we're going to verify that this thing has been invoked. This mock has been invoked with a certain path. So I'm going to say ./images/backlog. We're just going to make sure it gets called with that. And then we can also verify that this function, when we call it, which we haven't actually implemented yet. So I'm going to say get images in directory. And we are going to call that with ./images/backlog. And we should verify that this images that are returned should probably be equal to something. Right up here, we're mocking out the implementation of this function. But what it returns is an array of files, I believe. If you look here, it's an array of files. And each of these files probably has a name or something. I'm not really sure. I have to kind of look at that. You know, maybe we'll have the type here. If I do like fs read dir sync and then say like images for each file. I kind of just want to see what's on this file class. This is why I'm doing this. So I can say file dot, I guess name might work. There's probably a path. Let's just pretend it's name. I think name should work. So basically we want to expect that images length, I don't know, to equal, we could say 3, and what we're going to do is mock this out. So I'm going to say this has 3 objects in it. I'm going to say name of a.png, and then I'm going to copy this 3 times, B and C. Make sure we do async here. And let's just run this and make sure it fails. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this link and run this file. And just remember that this is like a persistence method. Sometimes you don't even want to test these methods because really, like, what is it doing? You're just calling an underlying file system method to verify. So this test is failing, and that is good. Let's see why it's failing. Saying that this is not defined. So now we can actually go to the implementation and make sure that when we run it, it's going to actually read a file and send back something. So let's just go ahead and make a new file. So I'll call it get images in directory.ts. I'm going to export that function. And let's just go ahead and import a file system from fs. And I'm going to say return fs.read adder sync. And I'm going to say images/backlog. In fact, we don't even really need to wait on this, but we'll probably get rid of the wait. So I'm going to make this configurable. I'm going to say this could be a directory, and I'm going to give it a string here so that we can actually like verify that we can read from different directories. And then this is going to have a type that's returned, which should be, we're just going to make it an array of strings. I think I can do that to say that this function returns an array of string. But I think I do need to make sure that this is mapped. I might have to actually do like a map on this, but we will come back and verify that in just a second. All right, so let's just run this and see to make sure that this passes or fails. Let's see how much progress we made. So this is actually passing now, but we actually want to make this so this returns an array of strings and not necessarily array of objects, because I think this is returning an array of objects right now. So what I'm going to do instead is, instead of expect length to be 3, I'm going to say expect images to equal, I'm going to say an array of a.png, b.png, and c.png. So let's just go ahead and run this test. It should fail now because this is now returning, objects, but really we want it to be strings. So let's just go back to our implementation now, and we could just do a map function on this and just return file.name. And I believe that should be all we need to do. Actually, it looks like this might just return an array of strings. So we might actually be set. I might actually be thinking that this function does something differently than what it does. So make sure whenever you're going to mock out any type of library, make sure that you're mocking out with the correct things. So I think this actually is just going to return a string of A, B, and C. So I'm totally messing this tutorial up. But again, this is like a live coding session. I haven't really planned anything. Let's try this again. Let's run it and see if it passes. It's passing now. And by the way, someone left me a comment. I really appreciate the comment. They told me a different way to basically not have to do this. And I don't remember what it was. I think it was like tsjest mock. Here it is, tsjest. Yeah, so they said I can basically use this. I don't think I have tsjest installed. tsjest, do I? No. So I'm going to go ahead and install that. npm install save dev tsjest. And I'm assuming I have to... Let me go to the installation before I just start typing random stuff. Yeah, I just need to install tsjest. I already have the types installed for Jest, so let's just run that. Go back a page. And basically, if you import this mocked function here, you can do something with it. You do this. So basically, you mock out the thing that you want, and then you say mocked fs. Pass it the thing you're trying to mock. Just.mock foo. Kind of confusing. Let's see. Like you import what you want, you mock it out, but then you also have like your mocked file here. But what that allows you to do is basically you can say, I think you can do this. Read adder sync. And then I have IntelliSense that says like this is good, I think. What's this complaining about? Dirent. You know, I don't really understand what this function is doing. Again, I'm a noob at TypeScript, so what I'm going to do is just run node. I'm going to say fs const fs is equal to require fs, and I want to see what this function actually does. So I'm going to say fs read header sync, and I'm going to pass it images / backlog, and see what this actually prints out. You'll probably make an image here. Run that. Okay, yeah, it just gives me a string of names. So I don't know why this typing is all jacked up. It expects a dirent. I don't even know what that is. The type string is not... Okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll be honest with you all. So I'm going to go and see what is going on with this. Do I need the casts as dirents? Like, conversion of type string to the type dirent may be a mistake because neither type sufficiently overlap with the other. Let me just try mocked return value and see if that helps in any way. Has that helped at all? Mock return value. Still complaining about needing to be a dirent, so I think there's probably a way to this guy's saying that you could do this a different way. Well, you know, I'm not going to spend all day trying to figure out why this isn't working. I've gotten it working in a different test by just simply doing this little hack thing. So let's just see if I can just keep doing that little hack and see what happens. Gonna do that. You know what? I think I'll have to leave this for another day to figure out why that's not working. Probably something simple that I'm messing up on, but let's just focus on getting this working because you guys care more about test-driven development and not about how to do TypeScript. So hopefully this works. Let's just rerun this. I should be able to exit out of this and run my test. All right, let's just move on to actually making an endpoint for this, and it's just going to return a random image ID. So let's make another test. This is going to be an integration test at this point. And I'm going to rename this one. Basically, I'm going to say get a random image. And this is going to be a get request. We're going to kind of like gut all this. You know, let's just delete all this and kind of start fresh. So delete all this. This as well. And what we want to do is we want to do a get request on an endpoint. I'm just going to say just do a get request on thumbnails. And this is not like proper REST. Like this should return a list of all the thumbnails. But I mean, I could do like /random, I guess. Maybe that's more proper. But basically, when you're doing this request, you want it to basically verify a random image ID is returned. Okay, so let's try to do an integration test to verify this, and then we'll come back and implement it. So I'm going to kind of steal some code from this other file that we have open, because we are going to have to use Axios probably, and we want to basically do a request to this endpoint. I'm going to steal that code too, but instead I'm going to do a get request, and we need to make sure we hit the right endpoint, so thumbnails /random. We don't need to pass it a payload, so I'm going to delete that. So let's just verify that the result we get back is actually a file that exists in this backlog page. So before we can actually do that, we are going to probably need to create a file. So I'm going to make sure I grab this because I'm going to need to do something similar. We're going to write a file called testing.png into that folder. And we want to verify if we have like maybe, let's do A, B, and C. We verify that we get back at least one of them. So what we could also do is, remember in that other test we had a cleanup method. I'm going to go ahead and bring that over because I know we're going to need to clean up these files when we're done with them. So A, B, and C. And make sure that I'm cleaning up from the right directory. So when this test runs, it's going to create A, B, and C. And then after it's done running, it's going to delete A, B, and C. But when the test runs, we want to hit that endpoint and verify that something came back and expect result to be in one of the following files. So I'm going to say a.png, b.png, or c.png. And then I'm going to say to contain result. All right, so the API is actually running over here already, and what we could probably do is try to run this test and watch it fail. So let's run the integration test. It should hit the endpoint, but the endpoint does not exist. Got a 404 back, so that's expected. So let's go into our index.ts file and let's go ahead and implement a new endpoint. So I'm going to kind of build off of this. I'm going to say we're going to have a get endpoint called thumbnails.random, and that needs to return us back a random image. So I'm going to say const random image is equal to await get random image. Make sure we import this. Well, it's not auto importing, so let's just import it manually. Import this file from get random image. And then we probably also need to import the get images in directory file. So get images in directory, because that is a helper function that we need to pass in using dependency injection. So when I run this, I should hopefully get back a random image, and we need to return that image. I guess I should say image path to the user here. So let's just go ahead and send that, and hopefully this works. See what happens if the test passes or not. So TypeScript is complaining because I have an any type on this. So again, I'm kind of new at TypeScript, but just remember that you probably need to type your stuff. So I'm going to say interface options, or I'm going to say get random image options is an interface with a function on it. And that function probably needs to return, I don't even know how you do the return type here. I'll have to look that up. But basically, I could just say options is equal to this. Oops, do that. And then I should be able to call that here. So I hope that should no longer complain. Let me just restart my service and then rerun my test here and see what happens. At the very least, you saw it created A, B, and C, and it cleaned those back up. But if you go over to the API, you see that it actually crashed at read adder sync inside the get images in directory function. So let's look at this get images in directory function and figure out why this is failing. I'm probably sending it a bad path. So like, where am I actually calling this? Yeah, this is supposed to take an argument, and I'm not passing it in. So I should probably make a type here. This is the problem with dependency injection. You have to make sure that you actually type the right thing. So get images in directory. I should probably have this export like an interface. Oh, maybe I have to use types. I'll say export type. I think I can do something like that. And then I could just say that this thing here, this whole function here is actually a type of this. And then I guess I don't even need to put this other stuff here. So what this allows us to do is we can go over to wherever we're calling this, and this is actually going to be this this type, I guess I should say. I'm going to rename this a type. At this point, this tutorial is all over the place because I don't know TypeScript that well, so sorry, y'all. But no one's really going to be watching this video, so it should be okay. All right, this one is now complaining. It's saying that I need to give it a path. So I'm going to say ./images/backlog. So that is why the backend API was crashing. If I would properly use TypeScript, then I should probably start reading and watching some tutorials about TypeScript. I think this would be a lot easier to do. Let's try running our test and see what happens. The backend didn't crash this time, but we got back. We actually got back a bunch of stuff, I think. So I think I'm checking the wrong thing. Let me go. This should be result.data, I believe, not result. So let's make sure that we check result.data. Try running this again. And okay, now it's passing. Because result.data, if I print this out, it's actually probably just going to be like one of those files. So let's print this out real quick. Cool. All right, well, that wraps up this little function. I hope I didn't confuse the heck out of all you, because I definitely confused myself. I need to go read up on how to do more like types in TypeScript, because I think I'm doing myself and you all a disservice by not typing my functions and creating interfaces so that I can properly verify that I'm sending the right arguments and stuff. So that's my bad, but if you enjoyed watching this, give me a thumbs up or give me a thumbs down if you hated watching me struggle through what I was doing. Leave me a comment below if you have any suggestions of how I can improve my TDD process. And like always, be sure to subscribe if you found this video useful, because hopefully it helps you become a better web developer in the future. All right, have a good day.